Yes.
Johnny, I'll hold you guys here. Yeah.
You want to
One
shake it?
here, yeah. On the stand. Start in about 1 minute.
You're cool.
Oh, you good?
All right, so let's begin. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today, this morning. We're here at the Little Rock Black Police Officer Association Lodge, which I think is a fitting location for this press conference and for the explanation of the civil rights lawsuit that we filed this morning. Let's not beat around the bush. There is rampant racism and racial discrimination that riddles the Little Rock Police Department. And aside from the moral implications of that type of discrimination, there are also incredible practical effects given the current violent crime spree, unsolved homicide trend that exists. So when you take officers off the street for reasons that are not essential, beyond its, again, moral implications, you are putting the city at greater risk. The department has been negatively impacted by racism and racial discrimination for generations. And I think that's beyond any type of serious debate. That's a fact. But there's also kind of a component of age discrimination at the Little Rock Police Department as well. And it inordinately affects African American officers. The situation goes something like this. When an African American recruit, young officer comes aboard, he or she is gung-ho, wants to get involved, but they're told, hold on, be patient. It's not your time yet. These are code words or code phrases. Meanwhile, their white counterparts are getting plum positions, they're getting favorable transfers, they're educating themselves, they are seeking and earning commendation and accreditation, and they're pushing their careers forward. The African-American officer then sits back, bides his or her time as instructed, is patient, is humble, amasses commendations over the years, education, and then when it's time to come forward, they're told, guess what? You're too old. It's a vicious cycle. And it is affecting young recruits as we speak, and it is precisely what happened to the very fine officers that I represent in the lawsuit that we filed this morning. Here to my right are officers, Sergeant, starting over at the end, Lieutenant Ernest Whitten. Coming closer to myself, Sergeant Derek Threadgill, then Sergeant Willie Davis, and to my immediate right, and we're very glad to have him here with us, Lieutenant Johnny D. Gilbert, Jr. Now, in today's lawsuit, there were 4 litigants. Sergeant Davis, Lieutenant Whitten, Sergeant Threadgill, and Jackie Parker, who's not with us. Jackie is an African-American officer who was terminated back in November for reasons that we argue were unjust. Not on today's complaint is Lieutenant Gilbert and a 6th officer that I represent by the name of Captain Tanya Washington. Quite simply, we had EEOC right to sue letters for 4 of the litigants. We're still waiting on 2 of them. When we get those right to sue letters for Lieutenant Gilbert and for Captain Washington, we will file a complaint and have it consolidated with today's complaint. So we're looking at 6 officers who are stepping forward in the great tradition of the LRBPOA. And so I'd like to explain a little bit about the complaint allegations, what they entail, and what we hope to accomplish. There are 3 counts to the complaint. The first count is a joint race and age discrimination count. And as I've explained to you, it alleges that there are practices at the Little Rock Police Department which serve to inordinately and unconstitutionally burden black officers, men and women, while not imposing those same types of obstacles or requirements on their white counterparts. What we're talking about here is a lack of promotion, a lack of hiring, uneven discipline, lower salary. We're talking about basically all of the kind of essential property rights and property interests that people can have in their employment. That's the first count, race discrimination, age discrimination, in violation of Chapter 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The second count it sounds in First Amendment law and retaliation in violation of the First Amendment. We think it's pretty clear that from day one, the current Chief Kenton Buckner has voiced his disdain of the Little Rock Police, the Little Rock Black Police Officers Association, and has really kind of strove to disband it from the very beginning. And what we're coming to realize is that he has a particular animus towards individuals within that group. And that group is a protected group. To belong to the LRBPOA is to exercise your right to associate, and it is to exercise your right to free speech. And as long as lines aren't crossed, and as long as there's no type of slanderous or untruthfulness coming from any of these officers, they are well within their right to voice their own personal concerns and critiques, as long as it doesn't interfere with their work. And we submit that it certainly does not. The final count in the complaint is under the Arkansas Whistleblowers Act. And here we talk about specific instances of officers reporting instances of waste or bias or other misconduct to authorities or in a court-like proceeding or tribunal, and then being punished or retaliated against for reporting that. And I think here of Lieutenant Gilbert, who gave testimony in the Perkins case, where he described Josh Hastings, the disgraced Little Rock officer who shot Bobby Moore, and his training regimen, or lack thereof. Under oath, Lieutenant Gilbert spoke of the irregularities that plagued his recruitment process, the favors that he was given, and how those types of favors were not extended to anybody else but him, and certainly not to black recruits. After giving that testimony, we think the evidence will show Lieutenant Gilbert was maligned, retaliated against, and harassed. The situation that you're all probably more familiar with, which is a slightly more recent vintage, would be that of Sergeant Willie Davis. You might recall that Sergeant Davis became aware of the very controversial racist recruit Facebook post. And he got that information and took it through the proper channels we submit, through supervisors at the LRBPOA. And that information got its way to the chief of police, where it should have been, and where it wound up, where it needed to go. And rather than commend Sergeant Davis for his disclosure of this fact, he was instead retaliated against and punished. And if there's any type of a situation that really typifies the type of unfair retaliation, it would be that of Sergeant Davis. And I'm recalling, frankly, one of the letters or memoranda that were sent regarding this, and how it mentioned very directly the case of Bobby Moore and Josh Hastings, and how the department knew before hiring Hastings that he had an association with the KKK, and went ahead and did it anyway. And I think that it was very embarrassing for the department to have it known that a blogger basically on a budget, shoestring budget, certainly not the resources of the department, was able to reveal this racist posting when the LRPD apparently did not. It shows that they're not properly vetting their candidates. And the question becomes, do they want to? Do they really want to find out the truth? And so the Whistleblower Act in this case is going to apply to not just Lieutenant Gilbert when he files, not just Sergeant Davis, but also Lieutenant Whitten, who brought to the attention of the leadership of the LRPD some potential misconduct occurring during the training process. And as a reward for that important information, he was swiftly transferred out of his division. Again, a pretty naked, blatant case of retaliation. The complaint seeks damages, money damages in the form of compensatory damages, lost wages, back pay, but it also seeks injunctive relief. And what we mean by that is we're looking for the court to enjoin or stop the LRPD from these racially discriminatory practices. And we're also looking for a declaration from the court that these litigants were victims of racial discrimination and a discriminatory practice. And so while the damages case is very important to the particular litigants, we're hoping that the injunctive relief that we're seeking is going to really affect every officer in the department, certainly every minority officer in the department, and hopefully clean up some of the mess that exists at the Little Rock Police Department. I mean, I can tell you just myself, looking through their files and looking through their personnel decisions and how they reach decisions, and the unevenness and the the arbitrary nature of it, the place is a mess. There's no rhyme or reason to what they do, the discipline that they impose, but you see a clear-cut kind of pattern. There's a hierarchy. At the very top, there's white males who are connected. Josh Hastings, white male, got a father in the force, brothers or cousins. That's the top tier. Next tier is your rank and file white male. I go back and forth sometime between, for three, whether it's black males or white females. It ebbs and flows. And then at the bottom, I think it's safe to say, are black females. It shouldn't be this way. There shouldn't be different types of discipline and different types of promotional courses that vary among race and gender. It's unfair. And so we want to sit Kenton Buckner down, Bruce Moore, we want to have Bruce Moore have a seat, and we want to ask him questions. We want to depose them. We want them to justify their personnel decisions. I've looked at it. It doesn't make sense to me. I have an idea of what's at play here, but we want to give them an opportunity to explain how it is that some officers get penalized in such a harsh fashion when others do not. And that's whether or not the underlying violation actually occurred. For the purpose of argument, I'll presuppose that some of these allegations are true. If so, and the discipline is warranted, why isn't it warranted over here? And so there's a lot of unevenness that we need to look at and we want to explore. I'm actually reminded a bit of the Erica Benedicto lawsuit, which was a racial discrimination lawsuit from, I think, 2014. And I remember Bruce Moore testifying in that case. And in closing argument, I believe it was Bill Mann of the city, said, hey, Bruce Moore is black. How can he discriminate against a black person? Which is a total fallacy. And I think everybody in this room knows that that's a joke. But just for the sake of argument, let's say that an African-American man buys an apartment building. And he decides he's not going to rent out to black people. Is that not a discriminatory practice? We don't need to prove that Kenton Buckner or Bruce Moore is a racist. We merely need to prove that they preside over racially discriminatory practices and policies. And that's a fact, in my opinion, that they do. And we think that the evidence is going to yield that 100-fold. So just very briefly, and I'm about to wrap it up here. As some of you may know, I was the attorney involved in the Eugene Ellison police-involved shooting. And that's when I really began to realize the dysfunction and the unfairness that really prevails at the Little Rock Police Department. Watching my friend and former client, now Lieutenant Troy Ellison, watching the hoops that they made this man jump through, watching the toll that the pressure that they put on this man, watching the toll that it took on him over the course of that protracted litigation, really got to me. Did you know that during the pendency of that lawsuit, he was called to an in-service meeting, which was being taught by Tom Carpenter, who was the attorney that we opposed. And Tom Carpenter pointed out to Troy in the middle of that crowded classroom where the shooter was, where her friend was, where witnesses to the shooting were, called out my friend Troy and had him explain some nuances of the deadly force laws. That was terrible. And that was just another way of the white structure, power structure saying, we're boss, don't you forget it. We're the boss. And I'll even share with you something that's really disappointing. And you know the wonderful story, right? Oh, it all wound up okay because in the end the city apologized, right? And they even gave Mr. Ellison a park bench at the Arts Center, MacArthur Park. Hallelujah. everything is better. Well, did you know that not even within a year, has anybody been there lately? Not even within a year, what did they do? They put another bench right next to it of a young man, white man, young white city worker, who committed suicide. I'm sure he was a fine young man, and it's terrible what must have been going through his mind to have him take his life. But the symbolic gesture of putting that particular bench within feet of Mr. Ellison's bench, to me, and to Troy, and to Spencer, sends an unmistakable message. Your father wasn't that special. We do this all the time. And you know what? Maybe he was asking for it. I can't read anybody's mind, but I know that that was a terribly disturbing thing for Troy to stumble upon. Wasn't even told about it. He has since talked to Bruce Moore on 3 separate occasions asking him to explain it, and he won't. And now he says that the family whose loved one is commemorated in the second bench are threatening legal action if they want to remove it. I can't imagine what the legal theory would be. But it's a mess. Bruce says, oh, well, Parks and Rec guy did it, I didn't know it, and now we can't change. I mean, the place is a mess, okay? The place is a mess. And we're hoping with this lawsuit to sort out some of this mess. And that's the real killer here, I think, is that my experience at the Little Rock Police Department of the city is no one learns from mistakes. No one learns these lessons. These are repeated ad nauseum. The LRBPOA was founded in, I believe, 1978 by Johnny G. Gilbert Sr., this man's father. And there are other very important folks, Grady Anthony, Billy O'Donnell, Horace Walters, Andrew Lockhart. These were pioneers who were swimming upstream if anyone's ever swam upstream. And so these fine gentlemen here are trying to carry on that tradition. And you'd like to think that things were better now than they were then. They probably are, but they're still terrible. And there's still a lot of fighting to do. In 2012, the LRBPOA wrote a letter to then Chief Stuart Thomas complaining about disparities among the races in salary, promotions, transfers, hiring. I sat Stuart Thomas down, as you'll see, because an excerpt of that deposition transcript is in the complaint. I said, you got this letter, right? Yeah. Significant letter? Yeah. What'd you do about it? Well, some of it was, well, the stuff that you thought was legitimate, what'd you do about it? Well, what'd you do about it? Well, I don't know if we can do anything immediately. Not asking for immediate. What did you do about it? And when push came to shove, he did nothing. He did nothing about it. This group takes the time to give this letter, supported by facts. He does nothing. Now in 2017, you look at the letter from the DPOA to the Board of Directors, it's the same stuff. It's the same letter, practically. That's deliberate indifference. Deliberately doing nothing about something, even though you're aware that it's a significant issue. No lessons learned. So, I'm going to yield the podium for a moment to my friend, my very loquacious friend, but Lieutenant Gilbert. He's going to talk just very, very briefly about some things that he wants to share. I'll come back up, I'll wrap it up, and then we'll take whatever questions you have, and we have got plenty of copies of the complaint for you. Again, I thank you all for being here, and here's Lieutenant Gilbert.
It looks like you're wearing one mic. Can we move that? I don't know whose mic that is.
Yes. Where are you?
Sure was it? Oh, you're fine.
They're always here. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Johnny D. Gilbert Jr., and I'm a police officer with the city of Little Rock, following in the footsteps of my father, who was Johnny D. Gilbert Sr. These are my co-workers, my friends, and my family, my work family. I don't want to belabor the point. I want to just allow Mr. Lowe to give and us to be able to answer some questions before we move on. I was at the hospital. I was injured on the job, and my family and friends have come to see me. In fact, Lieutenant Whitney came and picked me up about 45 minutes ago, so I could be here on time. He went out this way for me. Again, and again. That's what we do. I won't belabor the point, but I remember when I was a little boy, this is the radio. I remember this guy named Carl T. Rowan. Carl T. Rowan. He talked about this attorney named Barbara Jordan all the time. She says, what the American people want is simple. They want an America as good as it's promised. In my judgment, in my opinion, the Little Rock Police Department has not lived up to what it's capable of being. And we want to find out what it's capable of doing to be better. The issues are race and gender and age, and all that will be belabored and talked about in the months to come, but has it really truly lived up to its promise? I've been here since 9 July 1984. It has not. It has this unlimited potential, but guess what? It's not living up to its promise. We want it to happen. We really do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. Good day.
Hello. Hello. Go ahead.
Have a seat. Where? Right there. Front row.
On the subject of Johnny's injury, first of all, it's remarkable. The fact that we got this guy here with us is heaven sent and remarkable, considering what he's been through. And I don't want to be accused of pointing fingers too much here, but personally I believe that if Johnny had been paid historically and had been given the transfers and assignments that he wanted and was entitled to, the way any normal good officer, exemplary officer would be given. Maybe he wouldn't be out there working off duty in the middle of the night trying to supplement his income. Again, I don't want to milk it. I'm not trying to be unduly accusatory, but these are absolutely thoughts to consider. Because, these policies and these practices, they're not just academically wrong. They're not just constitutionally infirm. They have practical consequences. When you divide a department along racial lines, favoring some and disfavoring others, you are not going to have a department that's operating at full capacity, period. This city needs a department that's operating at full capacity, period. So, again, along with the constitutional and moral aspects of the situation, there are indeed practical ones. So, and my friend here said it very, very well. We're not out to vilify anyone. We're not here to vilify Chief Buckner. But he needs accountability for his decisions, as do other leaders within the city apparatus. And again, what we are really excited about is the prospect of sitting some of these folks down who will be represented, and I'm sure very well prepared. And I'd like them to justify a lot of their personnel decisions. And if they can do that, then power to them. But I happen to think that they're going to have a difficult time with that. So, in closing, I would just say that I am very, very proud to represent these gentlemen. These are salt of the earth kind of folks. Always there for you when you need them. Titanium backbones. Men of character. Leaders. Educated and educators. These are the type of people that should be given every opportunity to lead and to be prominent without fear of reprisal or recrimination. So, that's all we have this morning. Thank you all for being here. If you have any questions for me or for any of these gentlemen, we'd be happy to answer.
What was the breaking point to file this lawsuit now? You mentioned Hastings, Stewart, so this has been going on for years. What was the breaking point?
Well, when I learned of the, when Johnny testified for the plaintiff in the Hastings case, I knew that was going to be a delicate dance for him. He was just telling the truth, but he knew that that wasn't going to be appreciated. When I learned of some of the blowback he was receiving, even in the courtroom, in fact, Terry Hastings was there that day, as was Stuart Thomas, and man, those were some very icy, ugly looks that they threw at Lieutenant Gilbert as he prepared to take the stand. It was a culmination of things. So I wound up speaking with Lieutenant Gilbert a few months later, without getting in anything attorney-client-wise. We talked a bit about his understanding, his very intimate knowledge of things, my understanding of things based on anecdotal evidence and things that I've read, files that I've seen, and it kind of went organically from there. And there might be more litigants. I do have other folks who are trying to reach me, and if they have meritorious claims, then I'd be happy to speak with them. But that was really it. And just, again, what they did to Troy for the 5 years that they fought this thing tooth and nail was extremely disturbing to me. And so, you know, just let's think about this for a second. Just think about the tightrope that African-American police officers have to walk in this city. Of all the rigors that come with the profession of police officer, all the demands that are placed on these fine men, it's tough by any stretch of the imagination, but unlike their white counterparts, as black scholars have noted for years in terms of double consciousness, they have to walk a tightrope. They have two worlds that they have to reconcile. It's stressful, and it shouldn't be that way. And it's distracting, and it's immoral, and it's unconstitutional. So, Troy and then Johnny Gilbert, who, again, the testimony he gave was the truth, but the way he delivered it, the emphatic nature, the eloquent nature, it was very, very powerful testimony, and I think that it was very helpful in securing that liability verdict against Josh Hastings.
Can you comment on the relationship that the Black Police Officers Association plays in this lawsuit? Is there any role, or is the fact that, are they all members, or can you explain that association?
There is no formal association. Willie is currently, I believe, still the second vice president. First vice president now. Oh, that's right, and then Rodney went to the end. And is, Johnny, are you still media rep, as far as you know?
I am, yes, sir. When I'm available.
That's why he's up here. But, you know, one of our theories is that Kenton Buckner, his disdain for the group, from the get-go, his desire to have that group disbanded. Now we're getting into First Amendment territory here. So we thought this was a good location, but in turn, I do not represent the LRBPOA. I represent these individuals individually, but I very much respect the group and what they stand for.
They're all members, though, of the BPOA?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yeah, they are. All 6, and that means the 4 today, and then also the 2 that are forthcoming.
And can you kind of break down that process? What do you anticipate happening, and how will this play out in the legal system? Could you kind of just walk us through that?
You mean litigation?
No, the as far as like the 4 today and the 2
Sure.
2 later. Why is that
Sure.
necessary?
I mean, I'll just, to be perfectly frank, 2 of my clients received their right to sue letters from the EEOC on December the 12th. They've got 90 days to file. That's today. We were hoping to get the other 2 filed. Johnny, of course, was preoccupied, to say the least, and Tanya Washington, who's a very busy captain, also had a bit of a delay for other reasons. We expect to get those right to sue letters back probably any day now, maybe a week or so. The moment we get those in, I will draft a second complaint which names Lieutenant Gilbert and Captain Washington as defendants. I'll file that complaint and I'll move to consolidate it with this complaint. And then they both will be in front of Judge Brian Miller, to whom we were assigned this morning. That's how I foresee this playing out procedurally.
And I mean, I'm kind of ignorant about this process, but could you just break down, what is the right to sue EOC?
Sure.
Right to sue, what is that?
So there is, before you go and file a racial discrimination lawsuit, you've got to go before the EEOC and give them a chance to resolve it. And that's a statutory requirement. If you were to file a lawsuit alleging racial discrimination as a police officer, and you hadn't taken that step, your lawsuit would be subject to dismissal for failing to exhaust your administrative remedies. So you need to file with the EEOC within 180 days of the complaint of activity, which we did. Once you get your right to sue letter, you then have 90 days to file a lawsuit. If you miss that 90 days, you're foreclosed from filing on those facts. So it's just an additional procedure to show, and it's intended to weed out non-narrations that they are conducting and frankly covering up. But when you do these kind of extra police activities, you're taking police officers on the street. And I don't just mean literally walking the beat, although it is that in some instances. But I mean, you're taking them from doing pure police work to doing other types of administrative things, being witnesses in internal affairs, investigations, what have you. In the case of these officers, understand where I'm coming from with that scenario. I don't know if it's something like that for Chief Buckner. I don't know if he has made his career out of being the African American who is tough on African Americans and thereby useful to white leadership. I know that his color can sometimes lend a stamp of legitimacy to what he does among white folks. He relieves white folks of a lot of their guilt. I don't know his heart, but I know that he presides over a racist department that was racist long before he got there. But he's done zero to address that racism and done zero to implicate, to institute policies that would correct those practices.
Do you think the friction that the chief has with the Black Police Officers Association played any part in his non-selection or withdrawal from the Charleston Police Department position?
That's a good question. What an interesting and odd development that was, huh? In the middle of all of this turmoil, in the middle of all of this calamity, when you really need leadership, you really need someone at the helm. This guy's out looking for a new job in South Carolina. I found that remarkable. It explains so much, didn't it? Didn't explain a lot, did to me. You know, like I think I tweeted a while back, I want to see his letter, you know, he sent the letter to the Little Rock, the city saying, hey, I took my name out. I'd like to see his letter to the Charleston Police Department, saying that he took his name out. I wonder if he did take his name out. I don't know what happened with that, but I don't know how you lead after that, if you want the truth. I don't know how you instill loyalty in your subordinates after you tried to cut out the back door.